Guys, welcome into a midseason college football tier ranking for every Power 5 program. I wanted to do a little midseason update, and that's what we're going to be doing. And this is going to be kind of a where is the team at right now, and also predicting their future. I'm going to rapid fire it. We've got national title contenders. We've got New Year's 6 contenders. We've got solid bowl teams. Those are like 8, maybe 9 win teams. You've got your average teams at 6 or 7 wins, the below average teams, and then I had to make it, Colorado has its own tier because they are, for a Power 5 team, probably the worst Power 5 team in the last decade. So I figure, you know what? They need a shout out. They need their own tier. But guys, let's get it going. I'm just going to go right down the list, starting with Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, I think, is either towards the back end of average or the front end of below average. I believe they're 3-3 right now. Little bit, maybe new energy, just fired their coach. They've won a few games, but I'll say the front end of below average. Michigan State, I'm going to put Michigan State in below average. I'll put them above Georgia Tech, but they are a dumpster fire. Their defense still sucks. Mel Tucker has to get the defense, especially the secondary, figured out. They're probably going to be 5-7 this year, in my opinion. Next, we've got Clemson. I'm going to say Clemson is a New Year's 6 contender, certainly a playoff contender, but when it comes to that national title tier, I'm going to be really strict about it. I don't see Clemson with that offense currently. I don't think they generate enough explosive plays winning a national title, but certainly New Year's 6 bowl type contender. Ohio State, they're going to be either number 1 or number 2. They are a national title contender. They really have no weaknesses outside of special teams and that, defensive backfield that they're trying to get figured out. Other than that, they are phenomenal, ridiculous offense. They're going to be in it against anyone that they play. Next, we have Kentucky. I'm going to say Kentucky right now is a solid bowl team. They suffered the bad loss without, Will Levis. Looks like they're getting him back possibly for a big game against Mississippi State. This season could spiral if they lose this week, but right now I'm going to say around an 8, maybe best case scenario 9-win team for Kentucky. Next, we have Florida. I'm going to say Florida is average. Coming into this year, we all knew Florida, they had a chance to possibly be a New Year's 6 contender. It all resided on what Anthony Richardson did. He's an average thrower of the football, actually below average overall. And Florida, in turn, is an average team. Next, we have Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh fits somewhere between I'm going to say solid bowl team right now. They're either solid bowl team or average. If there was a category in between solid bowl team and average, that's where Pittsburgh would be. Next, we have Purdue. I'm going to say solid bowl team. They're about 2 plays away from having a Cinderella undefeated season. Aiden O'Connell, even after losing David Bell, still a phenomenal passer, the veteran quarterback. Purdue gets that big win a few weeks ago, I believe, in Minnesota. They're looking up right now. They've got an easy schedule in the Big Ten West. I'm saying they're a solid bowl team. Oregon, I think Oregon needs to go in the New Year's 6 contender category, maybe towards the back end. They still have a few, I think they still have USC and UCLA on their schedule, so it's not easy. They already have that one horrible blowout in week 1, but they've turned their season around, to credit to them. They got that major win that might have saved their season against Washington State. If they lose that game, you're looking at 2 losses. You're looking at more tough games in the Pac-12, but they get that win. They stabilize. They're sitting at 1 loss. They're winning every game by 40. They're doing a good job right now. They are a contender for one of those exclusive New Year's 6 bowls. Next, we have Auburn. I got to put Auburn in the below average. I'll put them above Michigan State. Some of this is Auburn, being in the SEC West, very tough division. But also, I haven't liked Auburn for a long time. They've got a coach that's a dead man walking. They're a broken program right now. Let's call it what it is. Oklahoma. I'm going to say, I'm not going to overreact. I'll put Oklahoma in the average tier behind Florida. What a disappointment Brett Venables is. And guys, this is the major issue when you see these teams hire new coaches. You have to give them time. You have these years where it's a setback. And unfortunately, that's what's happened for Oklahoma. We didn't think it was going to be this bad. We didn't think the defense was going to be this bad. But you know the excuses with these new coaches. They're just going to be like, I don't have my guys yet. That's what they're going to say. So it's tough for Oklahoma. They're 9-point favorites this week against Kansas. We'll see what they can do. But they are an average team right now, with a very average record. Vanderbilt, one of the worst teams. I can't put them in the Colorado tier. They did get that week 1 win against Hawaii, and I think they do have another win. But other than that, Vanderbilt, while they're a little bit better than they've been in previous years, they're still horrible. Virginia Tech, to me, is below average. Just your typical below average team. I'll move them slightly in front of Michigan State. They're competitive in some games, but I mean, my goodness, giving up 6 rushing touchdowns last week to the Pittsburgh running back, it is horrible. Oklahoma State, I will say back end of New Year's 6 contenders. You look at Oklahoma State, they are undefeated right now, but you're in a conference that's a gauntlet. You've got a lot of tough games upcoming, and if you look at the actual metrics, Oklahoma State is not that impressive for an undefeated team right now. So I think they're on the border. I could see them actually losing 3 games and being knocked out of a New Year's 6 bowl, but we're going to put them there for now. We're going to respect that they're undefeated. Huge game with TCU coming up. Next, we have North Carolina. I'm going to say North Carolina's solid bowl team. I'll put them in front of Pittsburgh. We're still very concerned about their defense. I'm a little bit concerned about this rivalry game this week against Duke for North Carolina, but they are one of the more underrated teams in the ACC right now. Only 1 loss, that loss coming to Notre Dame. Next, we've got Miami, the U. I think they've got to go. I mean, I'll put them at the front end. Well, you might want to move them up. It's tough with Miami. They're borderline. I would say Miami is somewhere in between. I'm going to say average. I'm going to say the back end of average. I know they lost to Middle Tennessee State. I know they just lost to North Carolina. It's not looking good, but they still do have some talent. Tyler Van Dyke just threw for 550. I think they can stabilize and still make a bowl pretty easily and maybe go 7-5. We've got Colorado. They're going to go into the Colorado tier. So Colorado, if you guys don't know, one of the worst Power 5 teams, I would say, in the last decade. We're going to see what their metrics finish as. They're probably not going to win a game. This week, it might be their best chance to actually win a game this year. They're 15-point home underdogs against California, I believe. So that's how bad Colorado is. They're probably going to go 0-12. Next, we have Texas Tech. They've got that big win against Texas. I have to go below average. I'll put them in the front end of below average. Guys, if you actually go back to their win against Texas, it was very fluky. You weren't facing Quinn Ewers. You were 6 of 8 on 4th down. You were at home. It was a lucky win. Texas Tech, to me, in a gauntlet of a Big 12 conference, will not make a bowl. Next, we have LSU. LSU is the back end of average. I'll put them in front of Miami. LSU, they got that big win earlier this year against Mississippi State. But guys, the common story, the common theme with LSU, at least in my opinion, Brian Kelly is not the guy. He's not the answer for LSU. It's not a good fit. Next, we have Michigan. So Michigan, I will say, definitely New Year's 6 contender. They are my current favorite to make the Rose Bowl. I've got Ohio State going to the playoff from the Big Ten. I've got Michigan going to the Rose Bowl, and I have Penn State possibly going to another New Year's 6 bowl from the Big Ten. So Michigan, I think we all agree it would be shocking if J.J. McCarthy goes into Columbus and beats Ryan Day, and Ryan Day loses to Michigan 2 times back-to-back with C.J. Stroud, with this offense, with JSN coming back. It would be shocking. So Michigan, an uphill battle, but still potentially a very good year for them if they only lose to Ohio State. Maybe even an outside shot at making the playoff as a one-loss Big Ten team, with just that one loss being to Ohio State. Next, we have Washington State. I'm going to say Washington State is a solid bowl team, probably towards the back end of it. I like Washington State. They blew that game against Oregon. If they beat Oregon, I would say, I probably wouldn't put them as they wouldn't be a New Year's 6 contender, but they would certainly be higher, and they would only have 1 loss. Last week, it was disappointing against USC, but still, I'm going to move them, actually. We got to respect them a little bit. Yeah, we're going to respect them a little bit more. We'll move them up a little bit into a solid bowl tier. Utah, this is a team I really respect. Definitely a solid bowl team. But they already do have 2 losses, so they'd have to win out if they wanted to make a New Year's 6 bowl. Their goal was at least to make the Rose Bowl. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. They've got the 2 losses, and they face USC, although I do think they will beat USC. Next, we have A&M. A&M right now, I'm going to say probably average, the front end of average. They've got a lot of talent, but they can't throw the football. That's basically A&M's problem. Wake Forest, I'll put them towards the back end of a solid bowl team. You could argue North Carolina, Wake Forest. Wake Forest, that home loss to Clemson, the overtime game. Their defense couldn't stop them. It's unfortunate. That's going to really bite them, in my opinion, Wake Forest. I know there are some predictions that have them as a New Year's Six contender or making a New Year's Six bowl. I don't see it for Wake Forest, but I'd have to look at their schedule. Maryland, I think Maryland plays a tough schedule, man. They just lost the game you can't lose. It's tough for me to put Maryland, a team that was a win away from probably being ranked inside the top 25, but Maryland still faces Penn State. They still face Ohio State. That's probably 4 losses right there, minimum. They just lost to Purdue. Are they you know what? I think we need to show Maryland some respect. Yeah, let's move them up a little bit. They've had a solid year. The Purdue loss is soul-crushing, but I still like Maryland football and where they're going. South Carolina, pretty much your prototypical below-average team. I mean, them or Auburn, flip a coin, basically the same thing. The offense with Spencer Rattler. It is what it is. They got that big win, against Kentucky, I believe on the road, but it was Kentucky's backup quarterback. Next, we have Texas. So I just think it's a situation with Texas where it's such a tough conference where there's a lot of great teams or a lot of really good teams in the Big 12. Every week you're facing someone good. Texas already has the 2 losses. They had the crazy loss to Alabama. They should have won that game, but they lost it. If they get one more loss, that probably knocks them out of the New Year's Six contender. And I would say right now, top upper echelon, really solid bowl for Texas. Really solid bowl. Alabama, I still think you have to put them certainly with Nick Saban, undefeated national title contender. My question with Alabama comes with Bryce Young's injury, the overall offense, the receivers. Who's going to step up? We know they have the talent, but who steps up for Alabama? That will be interesting. They've got that huge game at Tennessee. Even if they lose that game, they're still going to be a playoff contender because you win out, 1 loss, SEC champion, you're going to be in the playoff. Next, we have USC. So I'm going to say, I just can't do it with USC. I'm going to say New Year's Six contender. I can't put them in the national title contender. They've gotten very lucky this season. I would actually probably put them, I'd have to move them behind Michigan. Their turnover differential is completely unsustainable. Caleb Williams has a surprisingly low completion percentage most games. Still, they're undefeated. They've got a huge game. They're actually underdogs this week at Utah. We will see. But they profile right now as a typical team that's gotten a little bit lucky in some of these matchups. Next, we have Stanford. I think Stanford, the prototypical below-average team. I would move them behind Georgia Tech at this point. They are one of the worst teams right now in Power 5. David Shaw is on the hot seat. Next, we have Arizona State. I mean, you could possibly put Arizona State in the back end of average or the front end of below average. I think due to the coaching. Guys, if you don't know what happened with Herm Edwards and Arizona State, the Arizona State staff was actually undermining Herm Edwards, trying to get him fired, so they sent all of their offensive scripts to opposing coaches so they would lose, so they would fire Herm Edwards. It's kind of a train wreck with Arizona State, but they are competitive sometimes. You could maybe say they're average, the back end of average. I don't mind that. Next, we have Illinois. I mean, I will throw them in the solid bowl tier. I think they are more of a fraudulent team. I respect their defense. I know they're a top 25 team right now. They've got the big game against Minnesota. I think they lose it. But right now, we'll say at this point, solid. We respect them. They have not given up a touchdown at home in 4 games. Yes, the competition has not been good. But still, it's respectable, and I'll put them smack dab in the middle right now of a solid bowl team. It also helps that they're in the West, easier schedule, things like that. Next, we have Washington. So Washington probably, I would say, back end of solid bowl team, front end of average, one of those two. They've got a really good offense. Their win against Michigan State earlier this year looks extremely unimpressive, and they got a lot of hype off of that. So I would say you could either put them towards the back end of a solid bowl team and the front end of average. Iowa, I mean, they got a really good defense. They have a horrible, horrible offense. I'll say the back end of average. It's just tough to move them anywhere close to like a solid bowl team because the offense is so historically bad. Next, we have Tennessee. They are definitely a New Year's Six contender. I would probably put them somewhere right along here, maybe even in front of USC. They do have two huge matchups coming up at home against Alabama and at Georgia. That's a gauntlet. They might lose both of those games, but even if they can somehow go 1-1, they will certainly move up. I don't think they're a national title contender, not this year in my opinion. Next, we have Iowa State. So Iowa State's your typical average team. They have a really good defense, a really bad offense. They play in a conference. It's going to be a tough game every week in the Big 12. They're smack dab in the middle, in my opinion, right now at 3-3, I believe. Next, we have Penn State. So Penn State I will put on the back end of the New Year's Six contender. Very big game with Michigan. Very big game with Ohio State. You know, I think they do make a New Year's Six bowl. James Franklin's done a really good job, but they have not played a good schedule. They had that game week 1 against Purdue that they won. You know, it was a game they almost lost, and then their only other hard game was at Auburn, and we know Auburn's not a very good team now. Next, we have Nebraska. I think Nebraska, due to their early season, the firing, you've got to put them as a higher upside, below average team. I like Nebraska. I like their fan base. But they are below average, in my opinion, at this point, based on early season. Now, they've turned it around a little bit, but even against a team like Rutgers, who I think sucks, they barely won that game, and they were outgained. Next, we have Oregon State. I think Oregon State is an upper echelon average team, right along the lines of A&M, maybe even lower than Florida. But they're a team that's kind of come to life. They've been better, this year than in years past. They do have quarterback injuries right now and a major problem with turnovers. I will say average. I think Washington State beats Oregon State this weekend. Next, we have Syracuse. So Syracuse, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing I did with Illinois and say they're a solid bowl team right now. But it's TBD. They faced nobody. They've got a big game versus NC State, but NC State might be without their starting quarterback, so we will see. Next, we have Indiana. Indiana's a really below average team. I would say they're even worse than Michigan State. They're worse than Georgia Tech. I'll say they're better than Stanford at this point. Indiana was in the game against Michigan. They gave you a decent effort, but they are a below average team. Next, we have Virginia. Virginia's been such a train wreck this year, man. I mean, they got to go below average. They have Brennan Armstrong's taken a major step back. They have no offensive line. They have no defense. They're right along the lines of Indiana. Maybe they're even worse than Indiana. Mississippi State, I'll say solid bowl team. I'll put them somewhere up in between Illinois and Syracuse. They've had a good year. They've got a good air raid system. That loss to LSU is disgusting. I think they lost 31-16. So people hyping up Mississippi State, I think they're being selective about it because it's like the only underrated team in the SEC. Next, we have Ole Miss. Very similar, in my opinion. I know they're undefeated. I know they're a top 10 team. They're a solid bowl team, nothing more. I think, they're going to lose 3 games, in my opinion, in the regular season. Next, we have Louisville, your prototypical average team with Malik Cunningham. Not horrible. I would say actually probably more towards almost below average. I'll leave them in front of Miami. I'll actually move some of these teams in front of Miami. But yeah, to me, they're just an average team. They've got a good quarterback. But other than that, nothing to write home about. Next, we have Arizona. Arizona's a below average football team. I would probably put them right with Michigan State at this point. All right, next we have Duke. I'm going to say Duke is probably towards the back end of average. Boston College, I'm going to say, is maybe towards the back end of average. Another ACC team that's not very good, not horrible. You could actually move some of these teams maybe below Texas Tech, I would say, like BC. I thought BC had a really bad effort. Well, I thought their defense had a good effort against Clemson, but overall, that was a disgusting offensive performance. Minnesota, we're going to say solid bowl team. We're going to move them up a little bit because I do think there is upside for Minnesota possibly to make the Big Ten championship, being from the West. They do have to beat Illinois this week on the road. They are favorites. Arkansas, average team, really bad run defense, really good quarterback. Missouri, below average team. They almost beat Georgia, but they are a below average team. Wisconsin, I'm going to say Wisconsin's maybe a little bit higher end average. Maybe I'm overreacting to that Northwestern game, but I do think they've kind of had a breakthrough after the firing with Jim Leonard, now more of a defensive-minded team, throwing the ball around a little bit. They also do have that stud running back, Braylon Allen. UCLA, UCLA is a tough one. I'm going to put UCLA right now, probably right next to Utah. There are people that are going to say they're undefeated. They should be, a contender for a New Year's Six Bowl. I understand that. But right now, I don't think they make it. That's just my opinion. Next, we have California. I'm going to say California is pretty significantly below average. Just looking at other teams in the Pac-12 to kind of judge them against. Probably worse than Arizona at this point. Yeah, and probably better than Stanford. I think that's pretty good right there. Next, we have West Virginia. West Virginia did just beat Baylor, so we will give them some respect. We'll move them up to the average tier, and we'll move them in front of some of these teams. How far can they go? I respect Iowa's defense. Next, we have Baylor, who did just shockingly lose. I still think Baylor's a solid team, man. I'm sorry. I think that game that happened last night, they got really bad turnover luck, guys. Really bad turnover luck. But the defense was shocking. I mean, they do have 3 losses, man. It's just tough. I'll put them at the front. There's just not an average team. I think they're a solid bowl team. That's just my opinion. NC State, you're going to go with a solid bowl team there for NC State. We're going to move them up pretty significantly. I'm moving Purdue in front of Kentucky. And we're probably maybe I should move Illinois or Ole Miss in front of Illinois. A lot of teams to rank. Yeah, so I'll probably put them somewhere in the solid bowl tier. NC State, move them in front of Minnesota maybe. But I've been a little disappointed in their offense this year. I think a lot of people have. Next, we've got Kansas State. So Kansas State, again, solid bowl team. Maybe towards the back end of it. They play in a very conference with a lot of parity, so they're going to lose several games. I think they probably finish 8-4 this year. Next, we have FSU. FSU is either the front end of average or the back end of a solid bowl team. I think they're a solid bowl team. FSU is better than average this year, in my opinion. Next, we have Northwestern. They're right there with Stanford and Vanderbilt. All of these academic institutions, all of these teams this year, way towards the bottom in terms of Power 5 conference rankings. Next, we have Kansas. Very hard team to rank right now. I'm going to say average for Kansas. I understand they've gotten off to a great start. They're inside the top 20. They have a brutal schedule, man. I think they could finish with 5 losses, especially with the injury to their quarterback. That's why I'm going to say the front end of average. TCU, we're going to say solid bowl team. But again, this is another Big 12 team, in my opinion, who will lose games just due to their conference. Rutgers is really below average. I would say they're right next to Indiana. You could maybe leave them in front of Indiana, but they're really below average. And then Georgia, I've said for a while now, I think there's no way Georgia wins the national title. So at this point, I still do only have, I'm going to put them at the tippy top of the New Year's Six contenders, but my national title contenders are still Ohio State and Alabama. I would be absolutely shocked if anyone outside of Ohio State and Alabama won the national title this year. You can quote me on that. I've been consistent. I've said, forever that Georgia is not winning the national title, so they're not a national title contender. They've got an offense that, in my opinion, is simply not good enough. Not enough playmakers. Stenson Bennett's not good enough this year. That's just my opinion. So those would be the overall rankings right there. And yeah, I like these. I think these are pretty good. Obviously not 100% perfect. I would have to kind of look through each team and judge them, but that's good enough. Of course, Colorado. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.